Some Viking warriors likely died believing they had simply been outmatched in battle. In truth, some may have been carrying a counterfeit, a blade stamped with a name they trusted, forged from cheap iron that gave way the moment it mattered most. In the 9th century, a Frankish blacksmith etched 4 letters into red-hot Ulfberht. Modern reconstructions of genuine Ulfberht blades have shown a flexibility and edge retention far beyond ordinary Viking Age iron. Steel that could flex under stress and return true, and hold an edge through blow after blow, in ways lesser iron simply couldn't. Warriors paid fortunes for it, and scattered among the real Ulfberts pulled from graves and riverbeds, Archaeologists have found fakes, the same proud letters stamped into slag-riddled iron that would shatter in the first real clash of combat. Someone, 1,000 years ago, was selling counterfeit death for profit. That single detail tells you something the history books rarely admit. The sword was never really about metal. It was about a secret, guarded so closely that men lied, forged, and killed over it. Because before anyone could make a blade like the Ulfberht, someone first had to solve a problem so stubborn it took our species roughly 2,000 years to crack. How do you make a blade long enough to kill at a distance, without it simply snapping in your hand? The answer begins nearly 3,000 years before the Ulfberht was ever forged. Early metalworkers ran straight into that problem. A dagger, short and stiff, was forgiving. Stretch that same blade to sword length and physics turns against you. Pure copper bends like soft wax, and early bronze, cast the ordinary way, tends to crack along a blade that long, exactly when a warrior needs it most. For centuries, smiths who could master axes and chisels simply couldn't cross that threshold. The first real breakthrough came from the ancient city of Arslantepe, in what is now eastern Turkey, where archaeologists uncovered blades dating to roughly 3300 BCE. Among the earliest weapons long enough to genuinely qualify as swords, buried beside what appears to have been an elite figure. These were arsenical bronze, an alloy harder and more workable than pure copper. But the sword had barely been born before it revealed its first flaw. Arsenic is treacherous. Working it releases toxic fumes, and smiths who spent their lives at the forge likely paid for that knowledge with their health. A plausible explanation, though not a proven one, for why the smith gods of so many ancient cultures, from Greek Hephaestus to Norse Wayland, are remembered as lame and exiled to their workshops. One problem solved, a new one created. That would become the pattern of the sword's entire history. And from the start, this knowledge carried a price of secrecy. A smith who could turn stubborn ore into a blade that held in battle wielded something close to political power, and kings kept such men close rather than let them wander. That secrecy would shape the sword trade for millennia to come. The search for something safer pushed smiths toward tin bronze, and by around 1600 BCE, true bronze swords were appearing across Europe and the Near East, not just in graves but in battle. It seemed, for a moment, like the puzzle was solved. But even bronze, the metal that had finally made the sword possible, was hiding a weakness that would end the age that depended on it. Iron, which we assume simply replaced bronze because it was stronger, actually wasn't. Early iron, straight from a primitive furnace, is softer than good bronze. The Iron Age didn't dawn because iron won a contest of quality. It dawned because bronze depended on tin, a metal so rare it had to be traded across thousands of miles. And around 1200 BCE, that trade network collapsed. Palaces burned, civilizations fell. Smiths weren't inspired to use iron. They were stranded with it, forced to spend centuries coaxing an inferior metal into behaving like a superior one. This is the moment the Ulfberht story actually starts, not in a Viking forge, but in the wreckage of the Bronze Age, with smiths staring at a metal that had at first, made everything worse. That long argument with iron eventually produced something extraordinary: steel. In India, smiths developed Wootz steel, forged with carefully judged carbon and cooled with such precision that the blades carried a rippling, watered pattern later Europeans would encounter as Damascus steel and be unable to replicate. Some materials scientists examining surviving Wootz blades have reported nanotube-like carbon structures inside the metal, though how significant those structures actually were to performance is still debated among researchers. What isn't debated is the achievement itself. Smiths with no concept of atoms had learned, through instinct and generations of failure, to organize matter at a level modern chemists only later found the words for. That knowledge didn't stay in one place. It traveled, carried along trade routes stretching from South Asia toward the Middle East and eventually into Europe, passed hand to hand through merchants and craftsmen who rarely understood the full science, only that this steel behaved differently from anything else on the market. And that is what finally explains the Ulfberht and its counterfeiters. Bad. The genuine blades were forged from crucible steel of a purity Europe wouldn't reliably produce again for centuries, almost certainly imported along trade routes reaching toward Central Asia or the Islamic world. Bad. Hidden inside a Viking sword is proof of a global exchange historians once assumed didn't exist, and because that steel was so rare, so expensive, so far beyond what local smiths could match, bad, the fakes appeared. Men willing to stamp a lie into iron and sell a warrior his own death, betting he wouldn't discover the truth until the blade failed him in battle. Remember the counterfeit sword this story began with, bad. By now you know it was never just a fake weapon. It was the final chapter of a story that had begun 3,000 years earlier. In a Bronze Age workshop with a smith trying to make copper behave like something it wasn't, so the sword was never one invention. Bad. It was arsenic traded for tin, tin lost to collapse, collapse forced into iron, iron slowly, stubbornly coaxed into steel, each solution creating the next problem, each generation of smiths inheriting a puzzle they didn't fully understand and somehow, incrementally, bad, solved anyway. Every sword resting behind museum glass today is really a fossil of that persistence. Inside its edge is 2,000 years of failure, poisoned smiths, fallen trade networks, forgotten apprentices, and secrets worth killing for. Bad. History remembers the swords. It almost never remembers the hands that taught metal how to become one. And maybe that's the real lesson buried in a corroded blade pulled from a riverbed. We look at the Ulfberht and see a sword. What we're actually looking at is a chain of desperate men who never met, separated by continents and centuries, bad. Each one solving a problem the last one didn't live to see finished. A Bronze Age smith choking on arsenic fumes because copper refused to hold its shape. An Iron Age blacksmith cursing a metal that seemed built to fail him. And somewhere in India, bad. A craftsman folding carbon into iron with a precision he had no science to name. Only instinct, and 1,000 failures behind him. None of them knew they were building toward a Viking sword. None of them lived to see what their mistakes eventually became. Bad. That's the part the counterfeiters never understood. They thought they were stealing 4 letters stamped into hot iron. What they were actually trying to fake was 3,000 years of human stubbornness. And stubbornness cannot be forged. Bad. So the next time you see a sword behind glass, don't just look at the edge. Look past it. Somewhere in that metal is a poisoned smith who never saw the weapon he made possible. A trade network that collapsed and forced a civilization to start over with nothing. Bad. A craftsman half a world away whose name no one thought to write down. The blade survived. The hands that built it were never meant to be remembered. That was always the deal.